And now, ladies and gentlemen, yes, that's right, Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley, a name bound to images that became the very trademarks of an entire culture. The slicked back hair, the glittering jumpsuits on the Las Vegas stage, the hip shake once deemed too provocative for 1950s American television, and a voice that carried both the sanctity of gospel and the sorrow of Southern blues. Elvis didn't just sing, he redefined how a star could stand before the public. But behind the title King of Rock and Roll was more than record-breaking sales and sold-out shows. There was a man haunted by loss from the moment he was born, a lonely heart inside the opulent walls of Graceland, and a sudden death that turned him into a tragic legend at just 42. Elvis was the union of dazzling light and haunting shadow. He is proof that immortality in music often demands the sacrifice of private life, and it is precisely this paradox that keeps people returning to Elvis, not just to hear his songs, but to touch the tragic story behind the immortal voice, early life. Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8, 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi, a small town where poverty was etched into nearly every household. From the very first moment, fate laid a burden on him. Elvis was born a twin, but his brother, Jesse Garin, died at birth. Growing up in the shadow of the brother who never lived, Elvis carried the sense of being the surviving child, an invisible responsibility that followed him throughout his life. The Presley family was so poor that their first home was a one-room shack with no electricity or running water. His father, Vernon Presley, struggled with odd jobs but could never escape hardship. At one point, desperate, Vernon forged a $4 check, a mistake that landed him in jail and left his wife and son to fend for themselves. During those bleak months, Elvis had only his mother, Gladys, as his anchor. Their bond was so intense that many said she was not just a mother, but also a companion, the sole warmth in his otherwise lonely life. Elvis's childhood offered little joy. At school, he was quiet and often considered odd by classmates, teased for being different in dress and demeanor. Yet, he had something that set him apart: music. On Sunday mornings, he was mesmerized by gospel songs echoing through the white church. After services, Elvis would sneak outside bars in the black community to listen to blues and rhythm and blues, raw, soulful music that mainstream white America still dismissed. This unusual blend of gospel and street blues planted the seeds of the musical revolution Presley would later ignite. Life's hardships did not ease. In 1936, when Elvis was just a year old, a devastating tornado tore through Tupelo, destroying homes and deepening the fragility of his childhood memories. As he grew older, he clung more tightly to the cheap guitar his mother had bought him. He spent countless hours teaching himself chords from gospel and country songs, secretly imitating the vocal styles of black singers he admired. In 1948, at age 13, the Presley family left Tupelo for Memphis, Tennessee, a city alive with blues and the rising sound of rockabilly. It was a turning point of destiny. Memphis was a melting pot where the voices of black musicians blended with the country sounds of Southern migrants, shaping a restless, electrifying music scene. The shy boy with an old guitar often stood on the sidelines, watching street performers with wide eyes. No one could have guessed that this awkward teenager, mocked for being different, carried within him the spark that would soon shake all of America. Early career. In 1953, at just 18 years old, Elvis Presley walked into the small Sun Records studio in Memphis, a place where countless unknown singers had recorded before fading into obscurity. Elvis only wanted to make a record as a birthday gift for his mother. The song, My Happiness, was never released, but his voice instantly caught the attention of studio assistant Marion Keisker, who wrote down, "This boy has something different." It was the first moment Elvis drew notice, though no one yet imagined he would go on to rewrite the history of popular music. In the summer of 1954, Sam Phillips, the founder of Sun Records, invited Elvis, guitarist Scotty Moore, and bassist Bill Black to record a few tracks. After hours of fruitless attempts, Elvis suddenly launched into Arthur Crudup's That's All Right. He transformed the blues number into a strange new fusion of country and R&B, energetic, fiery, and so unique that the room fell silent in awe. When the track aired on Memphis radio, callers overwhelmed the station demanding to know, is this singer black or white? That very question proved what Elvis had achieved, erasing racial lines in American music. After just a handful of local performances, Elvis became a sensation. With his slicked back hair, bright pink shirt, and above all, his sensual hip-shaking, young audiences went wild, while older generations were scandalized. Conservative newspapers dubbed him Elvis the Pelvis and denounced him as a symbol of moral decline. Yet the outrage only fueled his rise. To young people, Elvis became the voice of rebellion for an entire generation. In 1955, Elvis left Sun Records and signed with RCA Victor in a landmark $40,000 deal, an unprecedented sum at the time. This was the turning point that launched him from a regional act to a national star. In early 1956, he released Heartbreak Hotel. The song shot to #1, won on the Billboard charts, selling over 1 million copies within weeks, an unheard-of achievement for a new artist. Elvis didn't just conquer music, he conquered television. When he appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, cameras were forced to film him only from the waist up to avoid broadcasting his provocative hip movements. Ironically, the censorship only heightened his allure, making young fans crave him more. To them, Elvis embodied liberation from the rigid rules of 1950s America. By the end of the decade, Elvis was a name no one could ignore. With hits like Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, and Love Me Tender, he sold millions of records and carried rock and roll, once dismissed as street music, straight into American living rooms. He turned his early career into a cultural storm, paving the way for the mega bands that followed, from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones. From the shy boy in Memphis, Elvis became the first artist to divide America through music. One side worshipped him as an idol, the other condemned him as a social threat. But whatever the controversy, one truth was undeniable. Elvis Presley had arrived, and the world of music would never be the same again. Career success. Within just 2 years of Heartbreak Hotel, 1956, Elvis Presley had become a global storm. He dominated radio, television, and cinema, a phenomenon Time magazine described as, "No one in the history of pop has ever transformed youth culture so quickly." From 1956 to 1958, Elvis unleashed hit after hit. Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, Love Me Tender, all shook up. Critic Greil Marcus wrote, "Elvis didn't just sing a song, he seemed to reinvent the very language of the American teenager's body and voice." He also exploded onto the big screen. Films like Love Me Tender, 1956, Jailhouse Rock, 1957, and King Creole, 1958, turned him into a multimedia idol. Critic Pauline Kael remarked, "Elvis on screen was a mix of innocence and instinct, at once seductive and threatening." At the height of fame, Elvis was drafted into the Army in 1958. His refusal to dodge service won him public respect. The New York Times declared, "Presley's return will be stronger than ever, for he has proven himself a model citizen." In the 1960s, Elvis shifted toward film, starring in more than 30 movies. Audiences filled theaters, but critics dismissed them. Elvis himself later admitted, "I hated most of the films I made. They were nothing but cheap formulas, but I was bound by contract." Then came his triumphant television return, the 1968 comeback special. Dressed in black leather, guitar in hand, Elvis sang as though proving he had never disappeared. Journalist Dave Marsh called it one of the greatest rebirth moments in pop history. From 1969 onward, Elvis ruled the Las Vegas stage. His white jumpsuits, scarves tossed to fans, and powerful voice electrified crowds nightly. Suspicious Minds, 1969, became his new peak. Producer Jerry Schilling recalled, "When Elvis sang, the whole room shook. People believed every word." In 1973, Elvis made history with Aloha from Hawaii via satellite, the first live concert broadcast worldwide by satellite, reaching more than 40 countries. An estimated 1 billion viewers tuned in. Los Angeles Times wrote, "Elvis is no longer just an American star. He has become the property of the world." From a poor boy in Mississippi, Elvis had risen to the pinnacle of 20th century culture. But just as he reached his brightest heights, the darker side of his life began to surface. Loss, crushing pressure, and the decline that would slowly consume the king of rock and roll. Turmoil and shadows. Behind the spotlight, Elvis Presley's life sank into shadows he often admitted he could never escape. The deepest wound came in 1958 when his mother, Gladys, the woman Elvis called his only true friend, died suddenly of hepatitis and heart failure. Elvis was devastated. A friend recalled, "I had never seen Elvis cry like that. He clung to his mother's coffin and said he had no one left." From that moment, sleeping pills and sedatives became his constant companions, replacing the warmth he had lost. During the 1960s, his film career left him disillusioned. Though the movies earned him millions, Elvis often complained to friends, "I feel like I've been sold out. I'm not singing what I want anymore." Contracts bound him into a cycle of formulaic productions, turning him into an entertainment machine while stifling the creativity that had once ignited his rise. His personal life fared no better. His marriage to Priscilla Beaulieu, 1967 to 1973, began in the glare of media attention, but ended in bitter divorce. Priscilla later said, "Elvis was never really mine. He belonged to the stage, to the public, and to the darkness I couldn't reach." Divorce pushed Elvis further into loneliness. The greatest decline came through drugs. To endure night after night of Vegas shows, Elvis relied on a cocktail of pills, painkillers, sedatives, stimulants. His personal physician, George Nicopolis, Dr. Nick, admitted, "Some days Elvis swallowed more than 20 different kinds of pills. Without them, he couldn't sleep, couldn't sing, couldn't live." Yet the very drugs that sustained him were also destroying him. By the 1970s, his decline was painfully visible. The press described him as bloated, puffy-faced, eyes vacant. After a 1976 concert, one journalist wrote, I couldn't believe this was the same man who once drove America wild. On stage, he looked like a ghost, struggling to sing his own songs. Still, audiences kept filling theaters. For them, even a weakened Elvis was still Elvis. His voice, though weary, carried a sorrow that brought thousands to tears. Elvis once confided to a close friend, "I have everything. Yet sometimes I feel like the loneliest man alive." That sentence encapsulates his tragedy. A man adored by millions, yet unable to love himself and powerless to save himself from the darkness that fame had carved into his life. Personal life. If Elvis Presley's career was a dazzling chronicle, his personal life was its opposite. A story marked by loneliness, fragility, and relationships that never truly endured. In 1959, while serving in the army in Germany, Elvis met 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu. The age gap made the romance controversial, but Priscilla eventually became known as the only woman patient enough to live inside Elvis's world. They married in 1967 in a highly publicized Las Vegas wedding. A year later, their only daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, was born. Elvis once said, "The moment I saw Lisa, I knew I had done something right in my life." Yet the marriage quickly cracked. Constant touring kept Elvis away, and even at home in Graceland, fame haunted him so deeply that he could not live a normal family life. Priscilla later admitted, "I lived in a palace, but I felt like a prisoner." In 1973, they divorced. Still, Elvis and Priscilla maintained an amicable relationship as co-parents. Beyond Priscilla, Elvis had several high-profile romances with stars like Anne Margaret and Linda Thompson. But these relationships were little more than temporary escapes. Close friends often said Elvis never found anyone who could replace his mother, Gladys, in his heart. That attachment left him perpetually unfulfilled in love. As a father, Elvis was tender and indulgent. He spoiled Lisa Marie with lavish gifts and spontaneous trips. But time together was scarce. Lisa Marie later reflected, "I loved my father, but he often felt like a fleeting dream. By the time I reached for him, he was already gone." Even his private life was suffocated by fame. Elvis could not step outside without being swarmed. Graceland itself offered no peace, with hundreds of fans camped outside its gates day and night. He once sighed, "I have everything, but I don't have freedom." After his divorce, Elvis spiraled deeper into solitude. His final girlfriend, Ginger Alden, recalled, "There were nights Elvis would sit alone, playing his guitar and singing sad ballads. He wasn't performing for an audience, he was singing to the emptiness inside him." In his personal life, Elvis never truly found happiness. He loved and was loved, but in the end, he remained alone in the vast rooms of Graceland, a place where glory and tragedy coexisted under the same roof. Death, the day the world mourned. On the morning of August 16, 1977, the atmosphere inside Graceland felt unusual. Elvis Presley, who was due to prepare for his upcoming tour, failed to appear on time. His girlfriend, Ginger Alden, went searching and stumbled upon a horrifying scene. Elvis lay unconscious on the bathroom floor, face down beside the porcelain toilet. Calling for help was an act of desperation. The king would never wake again. He was rushed to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, but after futile attempts to revive him, doctors officially pronounced Elvis Presley dead at 3:30 p.m. The world seemed to stop. He was only 42 years old, too young for a legend, yet already aged beyond his years by drugs and the crushing weight of fame. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, but the autopsy soon revealed a harsher truth. His body contained more than 10 prescription drugs, sleeping pills, sedatives, painkillers, even laxatives. His personal physician, George Nicopolis, better known as Dr. Nick, admitted, "There were days when Elvis swallowed more than 20 different medications. Without them, he couldn't sing, couldn't sleep, couldn't exist. What was meant to sustain him had instead destroyed him." When the news broke, America was shaken. Radio stations halted regular programming to play Elvis's music non-stop. Newspapers carried a single headline: "The King is dead." Tens of thousands of fans flooded Memphis, filling the gates of Graceland, crying, screaming, and singing his songs like a mass farewell ritual. One grieving woman told a reporter, "Elvis wasn't just a singer, he was our youth." On August 18th, Elvis's funeral became one of the largest in American history. His casket was placed inside Graceland for public viewing. The line of mourners stretched for miles, with some fainting under the summer heat. Tragedy struck again when 2 young fans were killed by a car in the crowd, adding to the sorrow of the occasion. Elvis was first buried at Forest Hill Cemetery, but within months his remains were moved back to Graceland, amid fears his grave would be robbed. From then on, Graceland became a pilgrimage site, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors each year to lay flowers and light candles. His death also sparked endless controversy. The press exposed the extent of his drug dependency, and the public condemned Dr. Nick, many accusing him of killing Elvis with prescriptions. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories flourished. Some claimed to have seen Elvis buying a hamburger in Michigan. Others swore he had faked his death to escape fame. To this day, a portion of fans insist Elvis never truly died. He simply left the stage to finally live free. Whatever the theories, August 16th, 1977 is forever etched in history as the day a legend fell. Elvis Presley, the poor boy from Tupelo, left the world while it was still echoing with his voice. His death did not close his story. It opened an immortal legacy, proof that the brightest lights also cast the deepest shadows. Legacy and influence. Elvis Presley's death was not an ending, but the beginning of an immortal legend. Half a century has passed, yet his name remains one of the most powerful cultural symbols of the 20th century, a man who turned American music into a universal language. Commercially, Elvis is still the best-selling solo artist in history, with over 1 billion records sold worldwide. He achieved 18 #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100, 3 Grammy Awards, and received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award at just 36. But numbers alone do not define his greatness. What makes Elvis timeless is the cultural revolution he sparked, something no star before him had ever done. Elvis erased racial boundaries in American music. When he sang blues and R&B songs rooted in black culture and blended them with gospel and country, conservative audiences were unsettled. Is he black or white? Critic Greil Marcus called it the rebirth of America in music, a place where dividing lines were broken. His daring fusion paved the way for the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, and countless others. John Lennon put it bluntly, "Before Elvis, there was nothing." His legacy also lived in body language. From the infamous hip shake to the dazzling Las Vegas jumpsuits, he created the template for the performance star, a model later followed by Michael Jackson, Prince, and Madonna. Elvis didn't just sing, he lived on stage. He convinced audiences that a performer could be a musician, a fashion icon, and a cultural phenomenon all at once. Even after his death, Elvis's magnetism never faded. Graceland, the mansion where he lived and died, became the second most visited home in America after the White House. Over 600,000 people from around the world visit each year to lay flowers, light candles, and whisper his songs. Critic Robert Hilburn wrote, "Graceland is not just Elvis's home. It's a symbol of belief that a poor boy could change the world." Time magazine named Elvis one of the 100 most influential figures of the 20th century, not just for his music, but because he embodied freedom, rebellion, and the tragedy of fame. Elvis turned his own life into a cautionary tale. Glory can lift a man to the highest peaks, but it can also destroy him. More than 45 years later, Elvis Presley still lives on. In the opening notes of Can't Help Falling in Love, in endless covers, and in the memories of millions who once screamed at the sight of him on stage. He left behind more than songs. He left behind a blueprint of artistic immortality, at once light and shadow, dream and warning. Elvis Presley was not just a singer, an actor, or a performer. He was an icon who reshaped how the world listened to music, looked at youth, and understood freedom. From a poor boy in Tupelo, Mississippi, he rose to the summit of global culture, sparking the explosion of rock and roll and opening doors for countless artists to follow. He erased racial boundaries in music, turned body language into an art form, and created the first true model of a global superstar in the age of mass media. Yet Elvis also stands as a bitter reminder of the price of fame, loneliness, drug dependence, and a sudden death at the age of 42. August 16, 1977, was not only the day music lost a legend, it was the day the public realized that stardom could consume a man entirely. More than 4 decades later, Elvis still lives. In every song, every film, every reenacted hip shake, and in the steady flow of fans who journey to Graceland to lay flowers and light candles. Critic Robert Hilburn once wrote, "Elvis didn't just change music, he changed the belief that anyone, even a poor boy, could change the world." Elvis Presley is gone, but his legacy remains eternal. He is both radiant light and haunting shadow, the American dream and a warning about the cost of fame. The king is dead, but the legend will never die. What do you think of Elvis Presley? Was he a symbol of freedom or the greatest tragedy of stardom? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to continue exploring untold stories of cultural legends.